What? Yeah. No, I'm behaving myself. No, I'm not playing in abandoned buildings. What? Again? Now, I suppose you had those people follow me again. Fine. Hey, this is Jimmy Pharaoh from Monte and the Pharaoh, and I want to thank all our subscribers. We have now passed 14,000 on our YouTube channel. But I want to ask our subscribers to take the next step for us and become a full-fledged member of Monte and the Pharaoh. Yeah, that's right, folks. There's 3 different levels to choose from. There's free shirts. There's free autographs. Just check it out and become a member of Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monte and the Pharaoh. Later.
I can't. All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestler broadcast, Monte and the Pharaoh. Only seen here out of Indie Music TV at the board. Our producer, Spidey, Jared. How are you, bud?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
It's always good seeing you, man.
Yeah, you know why you're good, right, Spidey? Because your team's not on television right now giving you agita. That's why your football team.
That is his team. He watches them.
He's a Giant
I'm
fan.
a Giant,
He's smarter
yeah.
than we are. He's smarter than we are.
You know, we got to get you on camera once in a while, Jared. People have to see how good looking you are, man.
Yeah, that'd be
Do you
cool,
know how
actually.
many-
We should get a
The first
camera
lady-
back here.
The first lady of wrestling would be very,
Do you know
very
how many
impressed by you.
wrestling chicks would be
Maria?
holding his email and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
That'd be rough. You get stalked,
You
Jared,
would
by
get
wrestling
stalked
chicks.
by wrestling chicks.
Yeah, that'd be
That'd be kind of cool, honestly.
kind of cool. Oh,
Yeah, it'd
just
be
a cool-
interesting.
Would you play with them? Is that what you do? You string
Shout
them
out
along
to
and
everybody in
break
the
their
room.
heart?
We'll
We've
see.
got ESO created. Chris Lee in the house. Chris, how are you, buddy?
Got your message, Bruce.
Chris sent us a wonderful Christmas gift.
He did? Mm-hmm. What did he send us?
I'm not going to tell you how much, but he sent us ESO
Chris,
in the
you
house.
gotta send money to me.
One of
I
our
don't ever see
sponsors,
it.
First Lady of Wrestling. First Lady, we got to introduce you to Jared. He's a good-looking
What
guy.
are you doing?
Phil in the house. RJ Hudson, Stingers. Jason, how are you? Jay Will, good to see you. Jay Will says Spider-Man 1977 TV series.
Yeah.
Is that the cartoon or the regular
There was a
one?
live-action one. It
That
ran
was
for
so
one
bad.
season.
Remember when
Boy,
they threw
was
the net
that.
on people? It was...
I tell you what, they scrambled to get it right with the Bill Bixby show the year after, or maybe it was the exact same year. It's right at that time. The original Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby. It's right at that same time. That was such a great show. Why did they tank so badly on Spidey? You think it was the pajamas he wore?
Because they could get away.
terrible.
They could get away with the Hulk.
They kind of found a way to get away with
They
it.
could
That's
get
true.
away with it, and they couldn't get away with it with Spider-Man.
Yeah,
right?
they just couldn't. And it looked like he was wearing pajamas. It was no good.
It looks like he was wearing pajamas.
was no
it was
good.
the net that was worse, dude. The
Yeah,
net was the bigger thing.
Right.
That was
It
terrible.
looked like a fisherman's
But
net.
you know, back
Gotcha.
then I was like pumped about it for a while.
Of course I was. Dude, what about the biggest hyped show ever that petered out quickly? Battlestar Galactica.
I hated that show, dude.
But do you know, you didn't like Star Wars?
Star Wars, I liked.
Okay, so coming off that thing from Star Wars, when you started to see the advertisements for Battlestar Galactica, this was going to be a regular show every week. I was like, yeah.
Dude, I like Buck Rogers much better.
Did I ever tell you the story of Buck Rogers?
No.
We went to a sci-fi convention, me and McIntyre, SOS Mackin. What's up, Scotty? We went to a convention together.
Cheap shout
right?
out.
Yeah, very cheap shout out. We went to a convention together. We were really there to see some other people from television, you know. But we walked past and there's Gil Gerard, Buck Rogers,
Nice.
right?
Yeah.
Not nice. Wait for it, okay? There were some real famous sci-fi
Was it like
people
the
there.
Tony
we
Atlas
had
moment?
this was great. Nothing could be like the Tony Atlas one. We had Dr. Smith there, from Lost in Space. We had Mrs. Robinson from Lost in Space. There was a lot of great fame. David Hedison, who not only did Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, did the original The Fly, was in soap operas, ladies love him. There's all these long lines, right? And they're all charging, unlike you, AJ Lee, reasonable prices. Very reasonable,
20
right?
bucks.
Yeah, something like that,
yeah.
right? All of a sudden, twice the price is Gil Gerard from Buck Rogers. You know
Well
what,
deserved.
You know what,
by the way.
You know what
Skip
Scotty
Gerard.
did?
What?
Scotty goes, hold on a second. He goes around the line, stares at him, and turns and says to me as loud as he can, "All right, I seen him. We can go now." The guy was charging a fortune.
How
It was
much?
like, get a hold of yourself there, Gil. It was like $50 compared to 20
Get
bucks
a
for like.
hold of yourself,
It was great though. He's like, "I've seen him. He's old. He's fat. We can go." I was like, "Wow, you just took a giant shit on Buck Rogers. Nicely done."
Do you know what?
Nicely
movie
done.
I want to see? I'm trying to find a bootleg copy of it,
What's
but
that?
I don't even have a DVD player anymore because it's like
It's
no, well,
obsolete, like the record
It's obsolete.
player.
So, but
Can you believe this?
but
How many mediums have we seen come and gone over the years?
Phil says Battlestars had some hotties. Yes.
Yes.
Well, Phil, no wonder. That's
No,
why.
but-
Did you think I liked you think I liked Battlestar? Well, no.
Which one was
Battlestar-
Erin Gray in?
That was in Buck Rogers.
She was the hottest of them all.
Oh hell yeah!
She was the hottest. No wonder you watch Buck Rogers. You watch for Erin Gray.
And it's on 33 MeTV all the time. But they kind of cancel it now. They go.
Me
By
too.
the way, what? I don't want to talk about Night Stalker, but every time I put that
You
show
leave
on,
that
it's
show alone.
so bad.
You leave that show
But-
alone. I'll start whistling. Boo-doo-doo, ba-doo-doo-doo. I love the Night Stalker. What's so bad about it?
I'm trying to find the first Fantastic Four movie.
You
From
mean the
like
one that
19
Roger Corman did in the
Yes.
90s? I used to have a copy of that on
Did
VHS.
you really?
I used to.
How was that? I never saw it.
Okay. The Jessica Alba stuff
I love the Jessica Alba stuff.
but it falls short of the mark of what the FF could be.
Right.
If you're an FF
Yeah.
comic book reader,
How about
you
the
know
second group of FF?
even worse. That was horrendous.
I just didn't like the
That-
whole change.
It was just horrendous. Oddly enough, if you take the Roger Corman film, which never got released to the public, which was messed up, I got a bootleg copy of it because I was in the business. Man.
Right.
I was in the business, the comic book business. I was in the business.
You're an expert.
Yeah, I was working in the business of the comic books, and I came across a copy of it, so I got it. It's so cheesy, but here's the odd part. Compared to these big budget album movies and the one that followed, it's way more enjoyable. It's way better.
How's the Thing looking at?
It looks ridiculous.
So it looked like it's a costume. It's
you remember
terrible
those
costume.
cheesy Hulk movies
yeah,
that
yeah,
happened in the
yeah.
80s? It's
Right.
something like that. But it was actually so cheesy, it was enjoyable. And they actually got closer to the real intention of the Fantastic Four than these movies that came after. I'm still waiting for them
Jay
to make...
Will says Super Krull
proper
was the best
Fantastic-
villain for
what
FF.
was that?
Super Krull was the best villain for FF.
That's, well, you know, I mean, it seems... I always liked the Mole Man.
My favorite villain of all
Dr.
time.
Doom's the shit, though. Let's just face
Yeah,
it.
but Doctor Doom.
What?
I
His
will
first
say
appearance
this.
was in FF number
For
4.
Spider-Man, it was Lizard Man for me.
Oh, I love Lizard Man. I agree.
Electro, and Mysterio.
Okay.
And the old school looking, like Electro with the stupid lightning mask, like not the newfangled Electro.
Right.
For the Fantastic Four, now you're gonna yell at me because I'm not the expert you are.
It doesn't matter.
But I'm gonna throw this in there. I
What?
know he's Hulk's enemy,
Go
but
ahead.
the Abomination.
The Abomination was fucking...
I fucking love the
Abomination's
Abomination.
my favorite Hulk opponent. You know, obviously Rhino was close by, but...
Phil said he had a Tweaky action figure. Now, Phil,
a what?
a Tweaky action from Buck Rogers. Tweaky. There's no... Phil, I can't even
Who
believe
played the
you're
voice
admitting
of Tweaky?
that. No.
You'll never guess.
Glacier?
Mel Blanc.
No, Glacier.
It wasn't Glacier. Bobby Fulton?
He's gonna get me. He's gonna get me after this. All right, listen. We gotta get
Glacier
to
with
the
the
real star of the show, Glacier, in a minute, Bob.
Glacier was on Burn Notice, though. Big prop for that, man.
Oh, we're gonna ask him about that.
Oh, yeah,
You don't
okay.
have to be a smart mark.
I liked it.
Like
well,
how
I like
loses
Burn
smart
Notice.
mark. I like throwing those terminologies
Smart
in here.
doesn't even go
I'm
in-
finally going to get this question out, and I'm
What's
going to
that?
ask Glacier it. But I'm going to ask him. I'm not going to tell people, but
Okay.
I want to know.
Okay.
Steeler Nation mourns. Legendary running back Franco Harris. Legendary Steelers running back Franco Harris has died. His death comes just days before the Steelers were to retire his number ahead of the 50th anniversary of the Immaculate Reception. They didn't retire his number yet?
This is only the third or fourth. I can't be sure, but the Steelers don't retire numbers. I think he was going to be the third one retired or the fourth. I can't be
I
positive.
was in shock when I read
The
that.
Steelers don't retire numbers. They very rarely do. And when you think about the great Steel Curtain team that they had, when they had half a dozen Hall of Famers, I think, on each side of the ball, that's crazy that they haven't retired numbers, because I could rattle right off the top of my head a whole bunch that should have their number retired. This one hurts. Being a kid in the 70s in New York was very strange to be a football fan when you were our age in the 70s, 10, 12, 14. It was weird and it was even stranger for me because I lived in New Jersey. The Giants had moved to New Jersey. I was living in New Jersey. I was very confused that they weren't calling themselves New York. The Jets were dealing with Joe Namath's shadow at the point that I got really into football. Joe was done. And the Jets were awful. And the Giants were awful. I mean, putrid awful. But the Super Bowl was always very fascinating to this kid.
Right.
And the first Super Bowl I really got to see was the Steelers beating the Vikings. And there was Franco Harris and Terry Bradshaw, Swan and Stallworth and Mean Joe Green. This was my favorite team from my childhood. I adored the Pittsburgh Steelers. I used to love how they'd smash the shit out of the Cowboys. I'm sorry if you like the Cowboys. I get it if you like the Cowboys.
Maybe you should become a Steeler fan.
Maybe I
should. Then the Jet fans.
Oh, right.
Then the Jets might win.
55
Maybe the Jets
years.
will win.
Not you. You're not bringing any bad luck. It's got to be me. That's hilarious. You keep betting on the Jets to, as your money goes down the creek. All right, the Jets are winning this game.
I'm pretty sure you just were talking about how great Franco Harris was.
Franco Harris was so great.
Wink womp. WWE Hall of Famer
Weep
Coco
womp.
Beware hospitalized. WWE
Wow,
Hall
what a
of Famer
testimony.
Coco Beware is currently in the hospital. The news has announced the official Twitter account at Wrestling Connection, a branding and creative agency owned by Ted DiBiase Jr. That the list of where, I don't know. Anyway, Coco Beware is in the hospital.
Weep womp.
That's it.
That's. If you're going to give Franco
You go
Harris,
on a 10-minute
if
rant
you're gonna
on
give-
Franco Harris,
if you're
and
gonna
you got
give-
nothing to say about
if
Coco
you're going to
Beware.
give Franco Harris a weep womp, why should I give Coco Beware anything more?
Well, let's keep Coco.
I love Coco.
Let's keep Coco and his family in his prayers during this holiday season.
Why is it
Hashtag
unspecified? We don't
pray
know.
for Coco.
Absolutely, but why is it unspecified?
Because they
What
don't want you to
happened?
know what's wrong with him.
Man, you in the wrong tune.
They probably don't want you to. Pharaoh's
I love
referring to the
Coco.
point when he was singing Pile Driver with Coco. Coco told him, "You're in the wrong tune."
Right. Meanwhile, he don't know the words. He's like, "What's the words to my own song?" That was great.
To the right
Feel
of
better-
the
feel better, Coco.
To my right is the star of the show, Mr. Jimmy Pharaoh. Jimmy Pharaoh,
Wah, wah.
along with his partner, Bart Kriggs, make up the band Wisteria Hall. Wisteria Hall sings such great songs as In My Dreams, This Life Not Far Behind, Here Comes the Rain, and the Monte and the Pharaoh theme song, Riding High.
Happy birthday, Bart, man. It's his
Happy birthday to Bart. I
It's
want
his
everybody to
birthday.
wish. Please hit the Wisteria Hall like and subscribe on their YouTube page. Download their music on Spotify and Apple Music and Reverb Nation. If you didn't know it, you are watching Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, which can be seen by over 2 million viewers on the Monte and the Pharaoh YouTube page, the Monte and the Pharaoh Facebook Live page. Hear us on the iHeart Radio, Spotify, Anchor, the Monte and the Pharaoh Twitch TV page. If you're lucky enough to live in New York, catch us on Channel 115 every Tuesday at 7 p.m. and every Saturday at 11:30 a.m. Channel 20 Wednesday at 9 p.m., where over 150,000 viewers see us weekly. The head of the cable network, this particular cable network, called us and said lots and lots of great feedback and a lot of viewers. Since we changed our time, were calling, trying to find out when the new times are. So they really should probably do a better job there.
Right.
But anyway, thanks to people like who we're about to have on Glacier, we're able to have such a great following and all the beautiful family members we have as part of Monte and the Pharaoh. Again, we want to apologize for the previous episode.
Hey,
She couldn't
some
make
things you
it,
just can't control.
but hopefully we could get that back.
You know?
All right, so we'll be right back with one of the greats. We're happy to have legend Tweaky.
He's gonna glacier your ass.
Ray Lloyd, a.k.a. Glacier. I'm going to ask you, is one of people called Ray?
He's
or-
Glacier! His name is Ray, but he's Glacier. We'll see you in a iceberg second.
Hey folks, this is Wolfie D here, and if you are looking to buy or sell a home in Tennessee or Southern Kentucky, you're going to want to call my buddy, the rock star realtor, Benji Bowie. And you say, Wolfie, how do I get in touch with this rock star? Well, you can call him directly at 615-390-8216. You can go to his website, bowiehomes.com. That's B-U-I-E homes.com. Or you can email him at benbuie34@gmail.com. BENBUIE34@gmail.com. When you need a home, you need the Rockstar Realtor. Tell him Wolfie sent you. Benji is a member of Exit Realty's Garden Gate team in Gallatin, Tennessee.
Elm Logistics, for all your logistic needs. Call 631-299-3595. That's 631-299-3595. Elm Global Logistics, pride, performance, and partnerships. And Nitro's Garage, for all your automotive needs. Call 646-675-2349. That's 646-675-2349. For all your automotive needs, Nitro's Garage. Ask for Jack.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, where we have the honor of having Mr. Ray Lloyd on the Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. Ray, how are you, buddy?
Hey guys, I'm doing really good. Thank you guys for having me on.
I don't know. Thank you for coming on. I'm sorry to be so long-winded, my friend. Kind of got caught up in that comic book talk. Did you read comic books growing up?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, when I was a kid, I wanted to be Captain America. As a matter of fact, when I actually started forming, what would become Glacier, a lot of what I put into figuring out who and what Glacier was going to be came from my memories of Captain America when I was a kid.
Wow.
How'd you come across Captain America?
Yeah.
Home a comic book of some kind? I mean,
Oh yeah. I was very, very fortunate. I grew up in unlike a lot of people. I mean, I was very fortunate. Me and my twin brother grew up in a very stable home. My mom and dad, they were both in law enforcement, and so we didn't have a lot of money, but there was a lot of love in our house. And my dad was just like a lot of kids. I thought my dad was the coolest guy on the planet, and he loved pro wrestling. He loved anything that was, that was really great, entertaining. Wasn't necessarily a comic book guy, but he served in the military. He became, a state trooper. To me, he was kind of like a superhero. So when I looked at like Captain America, I kind of thought of my dad. So yeah, that's kind of how I got introduced to it. Like most kids, I just picked up a comic book at the local store and became addicted to it. Just like kids of the '70s did.
Was your dad a big dude like you?
He was. My dad was very athletic. My mom was very athletic. My mom was 5'9", and she was a basketball player in high school. And my dad was a football player. And I was very, very fortunate. I had some pretty good DNA.
Damn. What are your plans for the holiday, Ray? What do you got going on? What are you and the wife doing for the holidays?
Oh man, I'm gonna do absolutely nothing. Except try to get through what we consider cold weather down here in Florida. We got like Saturday and Sunday. It's going to be like 35 degrees here, which I know for you guys is short sleeve weather. Right. For us down in Florida here, we got to try to prepare for some cold weather for a couple of days. But no, we're staying home. We're just relaxing and just taking it easy, which is very much needed. Just to kind of take it easy, relax.
You're not a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, are you, being in Florida by any chance?
Oh, man, I wish I could say I was.
I wish you could say you were.
I wish I could say I was.
Right now they're giving us fits.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, just so you know, real quick, because I heard you guys talking about the Jets earlier.
Yeah.
I am the biggest Joe Klecko fan on the planet.
Okay.
I mean, old school Jets, back in the day, and but it's kind of like I grew up in Brunswick, Georgia, about an hour north of Jacksonville, so I always kind of quietly root for the Jaguars, I quietly root for the Atlanta Falcons, but but yeah, I mean, lo and behold, all of a sudden, the Jaguars kind of accidentally kind of stumbled into maybe possibly making it into the playoffs here. So who knows what's up with that?
Well, it's all on the line now for both teams. They lose,
Yeah.
they're out. So, and right now we look
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we're about
exactly.
to lose.
Historically, you're probably in luck because our history is no luck. So you're probably safe. Probably safe.
Hey, Ray, let me ask you, with today's climate in the United States, with everything that's going on for the last 8 years or so, does the holidays feel different to you?
Well, yeah. I mean, but I think it's not so much the climate; it's just the fact that as I get older, you know, as I get older, what I realize is that honestly, like I was just talking today earlier to just by this is just luck of the draw. I mean, it had nothing to do with the fact that I was going to be doing your show tonight, but one of the guys who was so instrumental in my life when I was younger was one of my high school coaches, a guy named John Cochran, and he was my offensive line coach in high school. And he and I, he lives up in Minnesota now, and he and I ended up talking today for like half an hour. And and he has 3 sons now, and family, and he and I were just talking about the fact that that as we get older, it's really what's really important is the time you get to spend with people you care about. I mean, presents, whatever material stuff will come and go. But and as I get older, that's the one thing I really do embrace is the fact that, and I try to keep it, at the top of the priority list is reaching out to people that I care about, over the holidays. I've been so fortunate. I got a group of guys I grew up with that we're still great friends, and I just reached out to a couple of those guys today, and I tell you what, having phone calls with those guys and with people like my former high school coach, that's the kind of stuff that like this time of year, it kind of sucks that it takes being the holidays to make a point to reach out to those people, but if that's what it takes, so be it. But yeah, that's the thing that I've realized over the last several years as I get older is that's what's really, really important. It's just being able to spend good quality time with the people you care about.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Jay Will, Ray, Jay Will is asking, in your VSU days, how are your memories of playing with Jesse Tuggle, Mark Catano, and Henry Chubb, father of Nick Chubb?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just think of those 3 guys you just named there. I mean, and we just had, believe it or not, talking about feeling a little bit, of a veteran. We just had about a month ago, near the end of the VSU football season, our coach. I was very, very fortunate. The first year that Valdosta State University had football was 1982, and they've gone on, of course, to do great things. They won like 5 national championships. It's great institution for football. But yeah, I played ball with Jesse, played ball with Mark Catano, played ball with Henry Chubb, and it's crazy that those guys all came through during that window. But we had a reunion of sorts about a month or so ago, and Jesse came back, Catano came back, and Chubb wasn't there, but unfortunately he wasn't able to make it. But I got a picture with Jesse, and I remember when I walked up and we saw each other for the first time. I remember that here we are in this. We had a reunion at this big kind of tent outside the stadium, and the first thing he said was as soon as I walked up, he said, "Here's the only guy that's here that's more famous than I am."
That's awesome.
And obviously I don't know if that's true, but here's the thing I tell you about Jesse. He hasn't aged a day. He still looks like he was put in a time capsule. He looks amazing.
What did the boys that you used to play football with, what did they think when you became a wrestler?
I will tell you this. One of my very best friends to this day is a guy named Larry Pivotal. He was our freshman year. We got recruited together, and we met when we were being recruited. We became roommates and teammates. And then he was a Tampa, Florida native. And then he ended up leaving after our first year. And he and I kind of stayed in touch for a while, and then we lost touch for probably, I don't know, gosh, about 20 years. And then around 05, 06, we reconnected. And he would always say when we were in college, he was like, "Man, I don't know what you're going to do with your life, but one of 2 things. You're either going to do something with with pro wrestling or martial arts. I know that. And so he never really followed wrestling. So when we reconnected, he said to me, and he went on to, and he's a very successful businessman in Tampa. And he goes, man, what did you end up doing? He goes, let me guess. He just said, you did something with martial arts or pro wrestling. I said, funny you should say that. I actually combined both of them. So yeah, there's. And you know what? The greatest thing about going back and spending time with guys I played ball with 40 years ago, is they couldn't give a rip about any of that. They were just happy that I was still healthy, and still kicking, So, but no, it was pretty cool. Actually, one of the coolest things that took place at our reunion, because we were there for we all got recognized at halftime along with our coach Jim Goodman, who was just an unbelievably great man, and David Gilliard, one of my teammates, who was a couple years older than me. His grandson was a huge wrestling fan, and he brought his grandson up to meet me, and his grandson just had just the most just unbelievable childlike wonder look on his face when we had a chance to meet, and he, excuse me, and that's really honestly, like, in my opinion, when you do something like this, when you choose to pursue a career in the public eye, at the end of the day, that is really what it's all about. Is just putting smiles on people's faces. And here's a kid who obviously wasn't even born anytime close to when I had my run, and but to know that even years later, I can still put a smile on a kid's face. Man, it makes it all worth it, 10 times over.
One thing I love is the fact that you became an actor and a stuntman. How did you How did you break into that?
You know what? The funny thing is that my mom was actually, when we were growing up, and like I said, we grew up in Brunswick, Georgia, and St. Simons Island, Georgia had this, actually this really professional level theater group called the Island Players, and my mom was a really good actress, and so she got into doing theater when my brother and I were just 5, 6 years old, and that's where we would go. My mom and dad couldn't afford to have babysitters, so we would just run around the theater where my mom auditioned and rehearsed for these theater productions that she was in, and so I feel like I got the bug to be a performer from my mom, but yeah, I mean, it was just. As far as pursuing it actively, I moved to Atlanta in 1990 to pursue pro wrestling, but also to pursue acting. And so I started taking acting class with a gentleman named Jim Benton, who's still very much a great friend and a great mentor to me. And it was the first guy who really taught me the ins and outs of how to be a good actor in front of the camera. Not necessarily a theater actor, but to be in front of the camera. And so. One of the greatest lessons he ever taught me was that he said, you're resisting, being typecast. And he said, everybody seems to not want to be typecast. He said, but remember this, the second part of the phrase typecast is the word cast, which means you're working. So lean into it. Yeah. And so he really got me to lean into it. He's the one, actually, I kept parting my hair with this 80s style ugly hairdo forever, and he kept saying to me, look, like, you've got this square jaw, you've got this certain face, like, you need to just kind of go with more of a kind of a flat top haircut. That's what's going to work for you. And I fought it forever, but once I did, I'll never forget, there was one guy that used to always beat me when I go to auditions. He'd always at least get the call back, and I wouldn't get the call back even. And the first audition I went to after I gave in and said, all right, I'll just cut my hair short. I'll do it more of a flat top type. But and I went and I got the call back, and he didn't. And I remember thinking, all right, maybe I'm on to something here.
What's in the hairdo, huh? What's in the hairdo?
Yeah,
there you
it
go.
really is.
The Beatles didn't always look that way, and then the haircut.
Yeah,
there you go.
Well, I would tell you this. It was one of the main things that I honestly believe when I sat down with Eric Bischoff in January 1996 at his dinner meeting, which I've talked about a lot, in the past. That ended up landing me my contract with WCW and was the beginning of me becoming Glacier. A lot of that, I really seriously believe, had to do with the fact that when Eric looked at me, he could see that with this haircut and with this look, that was who he thought this first person, in this blood runs cold thing should be. But yeah, I mean, I started doing acting on the side and continued to do that even when I was wrestling, and then of course even after that. And I heard you guys talk about it earlier a little bit about when I I had the huge honor and pleasure of being in the. I got cast in the season finale of season 1 of Burn Notice, and I got a chance to work with Bruce Campbell, which was unbelievably awesome. Beyond words.
That had to be a high point. You must have been going crazy to get that. That's a
Oh
great
yeah,
show.
I mean,
Burn Notice
and
is a
just
great show.
you know,
so. Nice.
it ran for I think 8 seasons. You
Something
know, I
like
mean,
that.
any show that
Yeah.
runs for that long is.
Yeah.
And it was great. And Bruce Campbell, the first day that we filmed, I was there for the whole week. Most episodic TV films in a week, and which is running a gun and from the time you get there. And the first scene we filmed was the one where he was we were in the hull of the boat and he was zip tied in and I'm beating him up, I'm punching him, and what was one of the coolest lessons that I to this date I've ever had and someone who's really serious about portraying their character is every time I would we're shooting the scene and I'm doing this big left hook and I'm hitting him in the face and I'm missing by like 2 feet, of course, because of the angle they're shooting over over my right shoulder, and every single time we do a take he ends up like digging his tongue down like on his cheek and he spits out what looks like a tooth. And I keep and like I said, this is the first day I've ever met him. So we're shooting, and I'm literally like, what what in the world is that? But I mean, well, how is he? I'm not even hit. I'm not coming close to hitting him. So after about the third take, I just walked over to him and I said, Mr. Campbell. I introduced myself. I said, I noticed you keep spitting something out when we do. I said, what is that? And he said. He goes, and he's zip tied in, like he can't move his hands. He's zip tied into this chair, and he goes, after the next take, I'll show you. And so we do one more, and then they call cut, and then the makeup lady walks in, and she's touching up his makeup, and she has a Ziploc bag, and she reaches in and she grabs this little white piece of a tablet. And later, he told me, he said, yeah, before we started shooting, I just took a bunch of Altos and I cut them in half and I put them in the Ziploc bag. And I told, the makeup artist just to give me one in between each take, and he would just, he would just put it in the side of his mouth and then he would dig it out and spit it out as it were a tooth. And it was one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned of someone who was a true pro in what they did. I mean, he thought that much ahead to sell the fact that, that my punch, which is not even coming close to hitting him, as far as the audience is concerned, they get to see that it looks like I'm knocking his tooth out. So yeah, it's just one of those great lessons I got a chance to learn from an unbelievably great actor who I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah. And it sounds like one of your wrestling matches anyway, an illusion, you just knocked his teeth out. I mean, you're basically working like you would in a match.
I have to correct you both.
Absolutely.
I have to correct you both on one thing, though.
What?
One Day at a Time lasted 9 seasons.
Wow.
Well, both of you were saying, hey, if something lasts for like 8 seasons, it's got to be a good show. Remember, One Day at a Time lasted 9 seasons.
Yeah.
Trouble.
That was a heck of a show. So.
Look at Ray, you like that.
One Day at a Time is awesome. Up on your feet, up on your feet. Come on, sing the song. What's wrong with you? Oh, by the way, the next question, Mr. Glacier, not Ray.
Mr.
Glacier. The next question, I think I'm being set up here because I already know the answer anyway. Why do you make me ask him with a straight face, were you in my favorite movie, No Holds Barred? I hate that movie!
I love it.
He wasn't in No Holds Barred.
I think he was.
Yes, I was.
You were?
Yes, I was.
There you go.
Wait a
No
minute.
Holds
Hold on. I thought you said you
Yes,
started
I
your...
was.
Wait a minute. What year was No Holds Barred, please?
Was that
and
86,
that's
80,
one of the reasons.
88.
Yeah.
That's before he starts his
We-
career
yeah.
in 1990.
No.
I'm confused.
Yeah, we actually, and I once again, I got to make sure to thank you guys love my buddy Sandy Beach.
We do.
And Sandy Beach is the one who I could sit here the whole episode. I could give you all my love for Sandy Beach. Sandy Beach is actually the guy who recommended me to Fred Avery, the guy who trained me in professional wrestling. So Sandy Beach is originally responsible, literally, for me becoming a pro wrestler, and I love him as a friend and just as an ally. But he's the guy that literally steered me to a career in pro wrestling, and I thank him for that. But as you guys know, he played one of the headbangers in the scene, the fight scene, the underground fight scene,
Right.
with Joe LeDuc. And and he got me booked on that movie that summer. I think it was the summer of '87. I broke into April of '87, so it was summer of '87 or summer of '80. I can't remember, right around there. And so yes, that was my first dabble into the movie business, which is one of the reasons why I ended up moving to Atlanta in 1990. But yeah, I played, and I had a very, very, small, insignificant role. I was just one of the guys around the ring. I was just kind of basically like an extra. But you can imagine being on the set. It's where I got to meet Stan Hansen and Joe LeDuc, and actually, Vince McMahon was on the set for a couple of days, which was, and of course, I got to meet Hogan, and which is awesome because here I am, a kid just breaking into the business, but I do have a great story from one of the nights when we were filming when they were filming the fight scene between Stan Hansen and Joe LeDuc. If you guys want to hear it,
Let's hear it. Hit it.
all right. I was just telling this a couple of nights ago to one of my buddies. And have you guys had Stan on the show? Stan Hansen?
Yes, we have.
Yes.
Yeah,
Really nice
so you guys
guy.
don't know how great of a guy he is. Yeah, just an awesome guy. And so, here I was, this young wrestler, and all of a sudden, I'm spending my whole days getting to know Stan Hansen, and of course Joe LeDuc, who was great too. So they had this octagon ring that was kind of like, had like this kind of matted floor, and it was supposed to be in this underground bar or whatever. Well, this is at the end of literally if anybody who's worked on the film, that 12 to 14-hour days are pretty much the norm when you're shooting a film. So this is at the end of like a 14-hour day. I mean, long, super long day. And I remember where I was sitting, my position on the outside of the ring was right next to where they had the camera placed at that time. And they were shooting the fight scene between Stan and Joe LeDuc. And every take they would stop, and Joe and Stan were just like hammering each other. I mean, they were just laying shots in left and right, but I mean, hitting in safe places, but they were still knocking the hell out of each other. And so I remember that every time they call cut, the director called cut, he'd say, guys, just so you understand, you don't have to hit each other. With the angle we're shooting, it all plays to the camera. Don't worry about it. You don't have to really hit each other. And then they'd go again, and they'd still just bang the hell out of each other. So after about the third take, the director says, cut. And I'll never forget, like Stan, has Joe propped up on one of the posts, like with his hand on his right shoulder. And the director says, Stan, just want to remind you, this is the movies. You don't have to hit Joe for real. And then, Stan and Joe, they're both, it's a long day, they're tired. And Stan whips right around, looks over his right shoulder, and he says, you know what? If I'm hitting Joe too hard, he'll tell me. And Joe just kind of nods like, oh, yeah, like that. And the director goes, okay. They just went on shooting, and every single take, they just kind of banged each other around, pretty good. But it was just kind of like normal for them.
Ray, in your opinion, where does Hogan rank in the great actors of our era? I smelled Dookie in that question.
Don't ask me that. Come on, guys. You guys are setting me up here.
Answer. How good is he? He's great, right? Orson Welles level. Come on. Give it to us.
I smelled Dookie.
Listen.
Dookie.
Yeah.
One of the great lines of ever.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Ray, your background in martial arts, let's speak about that. You were the Southeastern heavyweight karate champion. How do you get into karate?
I was. Yeah. I actually, like most people, when I was a kid growing up, like I said, I have a twin brother. Me and my twin brother watched the Bruce Lee movie, and we said to our dad, "Hey, Dad, we want to study martial arts." And so my dad did some asking around, and fortunately, in Brunswick, Georgia, to this day, there's still this former naval military base that's now the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center called FLETEC. And two of the instructors that were there, who had strong martial arts background, had just opened up a local martial arts school. Their names are Bob Natsky and Frank Graves. My dad heard about them, went and talked to them, and signed me and my brother up. And lo and behold, I had never had any inclination that here 45 years later, these two men would still be really powerful forces in my life, but they are. I mean, both of them were my instructors when I started when I was a teenager, and still became father figures to me, and just mentors at a level that I can't even really put into words. And both of them are now around 80 years old, and I still wouldn't dare tangle with either one of them, but I competed in martial arts tournaments when I was in going through high school. When I graduated high school and went to Valdosta State, I was playing football full time because I was under scholarship, and then I would go to tournaments that around that area. And then when I was in Valdosta, I eventually met a young man named Bruce Edwards. His father was a old boxing corner man. I remember they called his dad Cut Edwards. That was his nickname. And full contact karate was just really coming into its own back then in the 80s. And so Bruce Edwards was affiliated with the World Karate Association, the WKA. And so he kind of taught me into becoming a fighter and training right there in the off season from football in Valdosta. He had a really really successful gym, but there were several guys that trained, and several guys that I worked with that worked out with that went on to have really good careers in the WKA. So yeah, during about three and a half years of my college career, three and a half of about the 5 years I was there, I competed, and it was like football, and then in the off season I was doing that. So it was a great way to stay in shape, and I probably would have done it even longer, but about around, I think around late 85 or so, they changed the rules to where it used to be the rule was the kicks had to be from the waist on up, and then they changed it from kicks had to be from the knee up. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I was smart enough to realize that one kick, that's just about a few inches too low could ruin me as athletically, and I'd lose my scholarship or whatever. So I wasn't willing to take that chance. So I finally stepped away from it. But yeah, I had a really good career. And here's the main reason I decided to actually get into full contact karate, because in tournament karate, it's all semi-contact, and I just was at the point. I was like, you know what? I think I'm pretty decent at this stuff, but I need to find out if I can really take a punch. And I know that sounds really crazy, but that was the reason I got into full contact karate. I was like, you know what? I know I can punch pretty good. I know I can kick pretty good. I need to find out if I can take a hit, and I did. I found out that I could take a pretty good hit, and so and I think that's pretty much the what makes any fighter that's a decent fighter any good is not only your technique, but how much punishment can you take. And I learned pretty quick, for better or worse, I could take a good bit of punishment and keep going.
Being a legitimate karate champion, you're the perfect guy to ask this, because this is the age-old question, the age-old debate. Who wins this fight, Andre the Giant or Bruce Lee?
Oh, I'd have to say Andre, because
Wow.
if Andre could get his
Wow.
hands on him, he would just sit on him.
Any chance of Bruce Lee doing what he, the fast guy was so fast? Is there any chance he could chip him away, or
You know what? Maybe. It's funny. I was just, you have all these reels that pop up, on social media. I was just watching a reel literally yesterday, Brandon Lee talking about, his dad, and they were showing clips, and of course I studied, like any martial artist that's come along in the last 40 years. I really, really studied Bruce Lee a lot, and his level of speed. If you go back and you watch his honestly, his speed,
ridiculous.
to this day, I don't think anybody's even equaled it. And but it's funny when it was funny how Brandon Lee, because people always want to say, oh, Bruce Lee was so naturally fast. Yes, he was, but Bruce Lee, if you go back and you look at his history, man, you want to talk about a guy who really, really worked his butt off. This guy trained almost maniacally, to get as lean as he could, to get as fast as he could, to kick as hard as he could. This guy trained even today. The level of training that he did and back in the 60s and 70s, for the most part, is not really matched by anybody today. A lot of people, I always laugh when people say, I went out and I gave 110%. And I always have a great saying, that I've said for years, 110% does not exist.
Right.
It's 100% or it's nothing, And so
Right.
if you say 110, 150, no, 100%. And, Bruce Lee, when I'm studying him, what I realized is that guy pushed himself, pretty close to 100% of what his body could do, a lot more than the average person could or would ever do. And that's something that most people they don't realize what that takes to, because the thing that what happens first is mentally. I mean, your brain will tell you to stop a lot sooner than what your body can really handle. And I think he really tapped into how far he could push himself mentally, as far as equaling how far he could push himself physically. And that's just something that that most people just because most people don't discomfort. I mean, people don't want to go through that. Most people. So, but he was a guy. If you could look back in him, he was so far ahead of his time as for how hard he trained, and he documented everything. Which was really. Well, I don't think a lot of people realize that either. I mean, this guy. I mean, he really, really was serious about studying, human performance way before it was cool to study human performance, which is, I think, why he was able to, he obviously was naturally gifted, but he took that and he worked his butt off to make sure that he capitalized on that as good as he could. And I think that's why he still endures today. People really, even though they may not know exactly why, but I mean, you can really respect and appreciate somebody who puts that kind of work in.
Most famous, obviously, for the role of Glacier. Or how about telling us how Glacier got started? How did this all come about?
Oh, man, wow. I mean, how much time you guys have? But no, the quick version of it is that, and it's like always, I'm very fortunate. I built a really good career, and and I do a good bit of seminars still. I'm still, QT Marshall, who's with AEW, QT, and I started the what's called One Fall Power Factory several years ago back in Atlanta. Last couple years, Cody came on board, Cody Rhodes, and we rebranded it as a Nightmare Factory. And I still do a lot of I try to go back and forth as much as I can for the 12-week camps that we have up there. And I do seminars all over the country and really all over the world. And one of the main things I tell people is that my overnight success took about 10 years. I broke in April of '87. I didn't get my break with WCW until till really January of '96. So it was almost 10 years. And so I know what it takes I know what it's like to have to be patient and get frustrated and think that a break should have come and it doesn't come. And QT, I mean, it took him 15 years to get his break, with AEW. And so it's one of those things where I like I said, I always say to anyone who wants to pursue something like pro wrestling is more than likely, if you're really serious about trying to make a name in this business and to build a career, you're probably going to have to go where the opportunity is, because the opportunity is not going to come to you. And at the time, we broke into wrestling. I was trained and broke in '87 with one of my best friends and one of my best teammates that I played the last 4 years with at Valdosta State. I was a center, he was offensive guard, a guy named R.D. Swain. We broke into wrestling as the Blazers, which was kind of like our Valdosta State University that's their mascot was the Blazers. So we were kind of like a football tag team. And then it didn't take me too long to kind of break away a little bit, because RD's thing was he was a much more natural pro wrestler than I was. It didn't come to me real easy like it did him, but he was just at the point where he had other things going on in his life, and it wasn't necessarily his end all be all to go pursue a wrestling career. Whereas for me, it really was. So I had graduated with my degree in education, became a school teacher. So I got a job in Atlanta in 1990. Moved to Atlanta and taught during the week and wrestled, every night I could on the weekends and the summers and the holidays, whatever. And then I became, and like I said, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but once I moved to Marietta, Georgia, one of the first things I did was get a membership to Main Event Fitness, which was owned by Sting and Lex. And all the wrestlers worked out there. And a lot of the guys I already knew anyway, guys like Disco Inferno, Buff Bagwell, Scotty Riggs. We all came up together. And so we were all working out at the Main Event. And through that, through Disco, really, I got to meet and become really great friends with Diamond Dallas Page. And in the early 90s, anybody that knows Dallas's journey knows that that's when he was with WCW, but he was still trying to break through and make a name for himself. He and I became great friends. And, I have a lot of great quotes that I use just because as a teacher and a coach. But my number one all-time favorite quote is, it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who's willing to say they know you. who's willing to put their name and reputation out there to give you a leg up. And Dallas was willing to do that with me, for me, with Eric Bischoff. And then so he ended up telling Eric about my martial arts background, all that stuff, and just coincidentally, that's when WCW was looking to, TBS, had already, there was a popularity of the Mortal Kombat, movie and the game, and then TBS had signed on to do this Mortal Kombat TV series, and so that was our main question: was how can we bring this into the wrestling ring, or can we even bring it in? And so that's how it kind of happened. I met Bischoff in January of '96. Made a good enough impression where he signed me right away, and then eventually Chris Kanyon got signed. Eventually Brian Clark, who had come from WWF as Adam Bomb, and Brian and I kind of came up together in the North Georgia wrestling, and before he became Adam Bomb, and then Ernest Miller came on board, and the four of us, and then James Mitchell came on board as James Vandenberg, and that's how it all started. But it was, like I said, it was it was almost 10 years worth of hard work just to get to that point of what most people, because this just was infancy of the internet. So when I burst onto the scene, so a lot of people, even Dusty, and of course Dusty became, who was my childhood hero. Dusty became a mentor of mine, and even Dusty thought that Eric somehow found me somewhere, and he had no idea I wrestled for 9 years and built a good name in Japan and everything before I came to WCW. So yeah, that's kind of the short version of kind of how Glacier really began.
How about the name Glacier, though? Like, you're going to be Glacier. And you're looking at him like, what?
Yeah.
What was your reaction when you got the name?
Well, here's the great story about how the name came about is we used to, I recommended a gentleman named Andre Freitas, who was a special effects makeup artist. He owned what was called AFX Studios in Atlanta, and he's a tremendously talented special effects artist still to this day. So Eric liked Andre, hired him to be the guy who created our look and the name and everything. And so he was the guy that brought Glacier and Mortis and Wrath and Ernest the Cat Miller from drawing board to finished product.
Okay.
And so we would have these what we call midnight meetings at Andre's studio, where Eric would drive over on his motorcycle and literally we'd meet at midnight and go over all these, the stuff that Andre had come up with. And of course we were meeting with Andre all the time. And so Glacier was going to be the first one of the four, obviously. And so we started off with a name, a list of like over 150 names. And we kept whittling away. And then we finally got down to like the final, quote unquote, top 10 names. And then here's the funny thing is once everything was said and done, Andre put a folder together. This was after I'd already, been out for a while. And I think it was maybe the 1 year anniversary, maybe of Glacier. But he put together a folder of kind of like all of his notes that he had put together. And this is something that's really, really funny as far as, if you look at timelines, because this was early '96. And, Steve Austin came from, stunning Steve Austin, came from WCW, went to WWE, WWF at the time, became what was a Taskmaster and all that stuff before he became Stone Cold Steve Austin. And so if you look at the timelines, it was about the same time when I was coming out as Glacier. And ironically, one of the final names that made on our top 10 list, I was starting with like 150 names, one of the names in that top 10 list, one was Glacier, one was Cryonic, and one was Stone Cold. Believe it or not.
Wow.
And of course, I'm the first one to say, let's face it, the right guy got the right name. All right.
Yeah, I got you.
but I still have all those notes, which is really cool because that was before, Austin never debuted as Stone Cold Steve Austin. It was just these two universes kind of coexisting and had no idea the other one was existing.
Just think, though, if you would have taken that name, that could have changed the whole way it was all going to turn out, right?
Well, like I say, let's just be honest here. The right guy got the right name. So.
Yeah.
But did WCW find themselves in trouble, though? Because you pretty much look like the Mortal Kombat guy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, wasn't there like some sort of infringement or copyright deal on that?
Oh, yeah. And the funny thing was when we whittled the name down, I'll never forget, it came down to the last two names were Cryonic and Glacier. And we were all campaigning for Glacier. But for whatever reason, I remember that Eric seemed to like Cryonic, and which Cryonic sounds a lot like chronic,
Right.
which most people consider the word chronic with
Weed.
marijuana. So I
Which could have
remember
been
Brian
cool.
Clark saying to me, yeah, which, kind of been, frozen marijuana. I'll never forget, like, Andre Cretus saying, like, he's like, we have to band together and pitch Glacier. He's like, you can't be, chronic, like, you can't be cryonic. Chronic, that's like a verb, I was like,
It's
look, man,
ridiculous.
I didn't pass English, and I barely passed English in high school, but we all campaigned, and we came up with this idea to pitch to Eric. It's like, okay, we'll go with Glacier, and then his finishing move will be the cryonic kick. And honestly, like, at that time, we didn't really know what kick was going to be the cryonic kick. I know. Here's the thing: I knew I wanted my kick to be anything but the super kick, because everybody knew the super kick. I mean, Sean was doing it at the time, and Chris Adams had done it before that, but we tried several kicks. So eventually, I got the name Glacier. We settled with Glacier. We settled on cryonic kick. But what we really also determined was that in the audience, especially at that time, you couldn't throw any kind of crazy, outrageous kick at them, because the audience just wasn't ready for that yet. I mean, and which sounds kind of ironic today, because it seems like everybody kicks now. But in '96, there were very few people that were actually throwing kicks, and very few people that were willing to try to bump off of kicks being thrown at their head, which, like I said, it sounds kind of like crazy today, because they think about everybody throws kicks now. But anyway, so yeah, so that's kind of how we settled on the name, and the name for the kick, and but yeah, so from there it was just we were like, okay, well, how do we figure out who Glacier is? And my whole thing was to go back, create this backstory, that really explained, and I was I was really big on wanting to kind of marry a little bit of fiction with a little bit of truth, So we did the whole, Glacier came from Japan. He studied with his master, blah 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 blah. But I also wanted to kind of bring in some truth to, make it a little autobiographical. So that's where we pulled in the story of, coming from a law enforcement family and blah 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 blah. So that's kind of how we kind of got started with the whole Glacier thing.
One of your biggest feuds was with Mortis, Chris Canyon. What was it like working with
Oh
Chris?
yeah. Oh man. Well, first, let me just say that I absolutely love Chris. I miss him every day. I really do. He was when we first met was when this whole thing came together, and he had been in the business, I think, maybe about as long as I had, maybe not quite as long, maybe a year or two less than me, but we both were chasing that dream of, like, our goal is to make it in pro wrestling, become make it at the highest level and perform, at the highest level. And so I remember when I first met him, we started talking. Of course, him and Dallas had known each other, and that's how we met. And I realized real quick that he had that same drive and that same passion that I did. And also, one thing that Chris had that I think linked us from the very beginning is the fact that we both were average athletes. I was an average college athlete. I couldn't run really fast. I couldn't jump really high, but I had pretty good flexibility, which is why I was able to, excel in martial arts. But Canyon was 6'4", around 250, 260, and had an unusual level of athleticism for that big, even though he had never really been like a basketball player, football player, anything like that. So our thing was, okay, let's take our natural gifts, and let's figure out how can we work together, and how can we entertain people as best we can. And I will tell you, every time we worked together, we went 100%. We kind of banged on each other pretty good, but never out of spite. We always hit safe areas, but we laid our stuff in, and it was just because we knew that that was kind of what Eric expected out of us, and we knew that's how we were going to get the best out of each other. But I can honestly say, I'm finally at the point all these years later that I can really talk about him without getting without breaking down. I mean, because I cared about him and loved him as a friend so much, and I still do. But yeah, I mean, I undoubtedly had the best chemistry in the ring with Canyon more than anyone else I've ever wrestled with, and yeah, I know I've said it 2 or 3 times, but I really do truly miss him every day. I mean, he was a great guy. He had some problems near the end, but and I really wish he would have reached out, more. But it was we were trying to reach out to him, and there was just it came a point where he kind of closed off to everybody, and then eventually, he passed. But yeah, I mean, the years that I spent with him, he was a great friend, and my buddy Luther Biggs and I, and Vandy, Jim Mitchell. Whenever we talk, we very much keep his memory alive because he had so many great sayings and great quotes that he could only say in that New York accent that we throw those around all the time. So we very much keep his spirit alive.
Ray, you hear about, I'm sure the pro wrestling locker room could be pretty tough, right? You got a lot of testosterone
Oh, yeah.
floating around there. Now, we all know that Chris was gay. Did Chris get, abused at all in the locker room? I know he's a big guy and everything else, but being that, of his sexual orientation, did the locker room give him any problems? And did you know he was gay at
No,
that time?
no. It's weird. I mean, to sit there and say that, yeah, we kind of knew. We kind of knew, but we never really asked him. I never asked him, and he never really gave up that information. But we kind of knew. I mean, here's a guy who, like all of us, we were on TV, 4 nights a week back then. And we lived in Atlanta, where during the '90s, it was the greatest time in the world to live in Atlanta. Every time we went out anywhere, we got carte blanche treatment. It's just, and you never really saw him, on dates with girls or women or whatever. And but it was like, what? It was like after a while, it's just kind of like, that's Canyon. It's no big deal, whatever. But no, in the locker room, it was never. I never saw any indication that there was, because once again, you have to think this was the '90s. It was a totally different time. And that was. I always say that one thing about Chris that I thought was very unique in the sense that even to this day, I can sit here and I think back and you know, Kenyon, he never displayed a lot of what people I guess would say stereotypical mannerism or tendency. It was never he was never one who displayed any of that. He it was just it just wasn't anything that was ever really talked about. But he was and he always seemed quite happy and quite in a good place with who he was and where he was. And but yeah, it was one of the things where we just didn't we in the inner circle, and in wrestling, everybody has their. It's like any place where you work. Everybody, you kind of have your clique, that you hang out with, and like I said, that's certainly not isolated just in wrestling. That's in any job, any job atmosphere. But we had our group, and everybody kind of knew, but we just didn't. We never talked about it. He never brought it up. We never brought it up, but everybody kind of knew, and it didn't change anything. It was what it was. And I remember after he did the show where he with Dallas where he came out. He called me a few days later, and he was just like, "So does this change anything between me and you?" And I was like, "No, of course not, bro. I knew a long time ago." And I remember him and that New York accent. He said, "You MFer, you're kidding me. You didn't know." I was like, "Yeah, bro, I knew." I was like, "So it didn't change anything between us back then. Why should it change anything now? You're still my bud. You're always going to be. That's how it is. I mean, I didn't do what you do, whatever you do. I mean, I don't care. As long as you're still good to me and I'm good to you. That's all that really matters. And that's kind of how we addressed it, and then we left it at that. We never really discussed it again.
Being that you were in his inner circle and that you were so close to him, when he took his life the way he did, you mentioned just maybe a minute or two ago that he had started to shut people off and, build walls perhaps.
Yeah.
So are you shocked when he takes his life? Are you resigned because you kind of like felt maybe it was coming? Where were you at when you heard the news?
Yeah. Yeah, I remember exactly where I was, and I can't say that I was shocked because the last maybe couple of years, he got to the point to where, it was hard to communicate with him. I mean, he was more like, communicating through text. And even though, not only just me, but, Luther and Vandy. Vandy was, of course, the closest to him, Jim Mitchell. But, it was just, I'd still communicate, but where I would just, want to get him on the phone and talk. I mean, he wasn't at a point where he really wanted to talk much. So it was a lot easier to communicate through text. But, I'll never forget. Yeah, it was the morning when I was driving, and ironically, I was working with Mark Marrow. His brother Joel Marrow I'd moved back to Atlanta during the time, and because my mom was up there, and my brother, and Joel had a very successful pool business where he's building pools, and so I was actually doing a little work with Joel on the side, and he called me up and said, hey, want to come help me today do this one pool out. And we're going out towards Stone Mountain, Georgia, and I was following him out just to help him go to this property and kind of assess this pool, and Vandy called me, and I'll never forget. The exact words were he just said, he said, he finally did it. And I said, what? And he said, Canyon. He said, he's gone. And I remember pulling off the side of the road and just first of all, being in shock, taking a minute to take it in. And then, of course, just getting really emotional, obviously, because as anybody would when you hear that kind of news. And then I called Joel and I just said, hey, look, I can't do anything. I just need to go have some time to myself. And yeah, I mean, it was just so sad because he was such a great guy. And yes, he made an unbelievable contribution to wrestling, but I'm just happy I got to know the guy, Chris Canyon, because we had an equal love for the same thing, which was pro wrestling, and that's what bonded us. And that's my best memories of him, is the fact that he was a great guy. Some of the greatest times that we had were just sitting around drinking beer, talking wrestling, and just just being buddies. And we were brought together by our love for the pro wrestling business, and that's something that I'll always remember about him, is that he was such a good, fun guy to be around, and I miss him every day. I really hate that he's gone. I really do.
Oh, who's better than Canyon?
Who's better than Canyon?
Who's better than Canyon?
Exactly.
There you go.
Yeah.
Did you ever get a call from WWE after the WCW years? I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, I did, and I've talked about this a couple times on some other shows. We got bought out in April of '01, and at that time I was engaged to get married, and one of my very best friends, Steve Day, who actually was Cody's high school wrestling coach, coached him to 2 state championships. He was department head at Lastra High School, where Cody was going to school at the time, and of course I had gotten to know Dusty through WCW, and in 2000 Dusty left WCW and started Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling, and I was helping Dusty. Became his right hand guy with that while I was still working for WCW. Then we got bought out, and it was a little while went by. Terry Taylor was someone who's helped me tremendously throughout my entire wrestling career. Terry actually advised me on how to put together a tape to send to WWE. And actually, I put together a tape where I put a highlight reel together of Glacier, and I actually went into the studio and I actually taped I grew my beard back out again, and I actually put on the whole Coach Buzz Stern gimmick, and I did a promo introducing Ray Lloyd as Glacier as Coach Buzz Stern, which was a lot of fun to do. And I sent it in, and they thought it was great. And actually, Kevin Kelly actually was the person I was dealing with. He called me, and they actually ended up offering me a deal. They wanted me somehow. The office had learned about the fact that my family, was all in law enforcement, and my dad and my mom and my twin brother and my 2 uncles, everybody except me, obviously. But my dad had a very celebrated career as a Georgia State Trooper, so they wanted me to come in, and they had an idea about me doing doing a state trooper type gimmick, which had kind of been done a couple times before, but I felt like I was entertaining a little bit, but I remember I went to talk to Dusty because I was weighing like, okay, I just accepted a teaching position and coaching, and I can sit here and work with my childhood hero, Dusty Rhodes, helping him build his company, or I can go back on the road full time with WWE, and I just want to be honest and be fair here. The offer they were making me was a very minimal offer. Okay, they weren't recruiting me heavy, but they made an offer, and it was, I mean, it was respectable, but they didn't have to offer any of us anything at that time because they had a full roster already, and they were trying to, they were looking to handpick a few people, and I really appreciated the offer, but I sat down
Ray,
with
I
Dusty
might
and I
be
got his
overstepping
advice
my
on it.
boundaries here,
Yeah.
but what's a minimal offer from the WWE?
Oh, it was your typical, like, it was like typical, like 1,500 a week, which is like about 78,000 a year, and then you would get based on if you did the pay-per-views and if you were where you were on the pay-per-views, that would be, but with that brutal traveling schedule, $1,500 a week, that was kind of like the minimal offer back in the day with WCW or WWE. That's not a lot of money, and you're paid as an independent contractor. I mean, it was, to put those kind of that kind of mileage in every year. I mean, you're on the road literally all the time. I mean, it was literally no money, and so I remember thinking, okay, well, and in Marietta, Georgia, to this day, even it's one of the highest paying counties as far as I know in the country, as far as cost of living compared to what teachers make. They get paid very, very well up there, and so I remember when I was talking to Dallas about it, and Dallas said, well, hell, yeah, you'll be making, pretty close to that if and staying home. I said, yeah, and I can work with Dusty, so, but I went and had a heart to heart with Dusty, and I remember, telling him kind of what was on the table, and I remember exactly what Dusty told me, which it literally, it just resonated with me so much. He said, he always called me Raymond, and he said, Raymond, so I'm going to ask you one question. He said, are you willing to trust your daddy's legacy to the pro wrestling business? And I said, hell no. He goes, well, I think you got your answer. And I literally had a little flip phone back then. I went outside and I called, and I just respectfully declined their offer. And like I said, I want to be very clear. It was a minimal offer. They weren't recruiting me really hard. It might have been more, as a favor to somebody. I don't even know. But it was nice that they made an offer. But at the time, and of course, I had the pleasure of and the honor of working, under Paul Orndorff when he was, at the power plant, and which was just the biggest thrill in the world to get to know Paul. And I remember Paul always saying, "Hey, your goal should be to work for both companies, but not burn any bridges when everything's said and done." So, of course, yeah, I would have loved to have been able to have a run with WWE, but I made a decision, to go a different route, and I can tell you, yes, I mean, there's a part of me that always wonders what that would have been like, but to have worked with Dusty, who was my hero, and to help him build Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling, and get to know him on the level that I got to know him, I can't imagine if I would have gone with WWE that decision would have been, I would have had any better experience than I would have had working alongside Dusty, for those few years, because that was just life changing for me, and to this day, I'm thrilled to death to say that I got a chance to get to know my childhood hero and really become, like I said, his right hand guy to help build his company during those few years that he was building TCW. So yeah, I mean, very few regrets on my end.
Ray, time's flying. We're out of time. I want to hit you with something called the Pharaoh's final question. First of all, we want to thank you for joining us. Incredible. We could have did 3 hours. We got to have you back on.
I know. Well, thank you guys so much. Yeah, I definitely want to come back in like maybe in a few months in the spring because I got something really, really big to talk about. So
that sounds good. Awesome. All right, Pharaoh, you got it. Big question.
All righty. You obviously were there during one of the greatest times in the history of pro wrestling, and you got to witness the NWO in the locker room. So I ask you, how was Hogan? All three of them. How was Hogan, Nash, and Hall towards you? And did you ever see how they were towards others? Do you ever see them throwing their weight around? Because you know what their reputations are. Any chance you could help clear up what it was like with those guys in the locker room, brother?
Well, yeah, let me start with Scott. I actually met Scott years before when, because in the summer of '89, I got a chance to, I kind of was one of the faceless opponents, during the summer of '89, when they were filming at Center Stage. And somewhere along the way, I got a chance to meet Scott, and he was very, very kind to me and was very helpful to me, even before he became Razor Ramon. And, so when I ran into Scott again, during the WCW years, during the Glacier years, he was always great. It was always great to me. And I never really knew Kevin that much. We always, to this day, we always speak in passing, and we're always cordial. I never got a chance to really be around Kevin, and during that time when he came in, they were coming in. He came in from WWF or WWE. Of course, there was a lot of things being said. I just, it was like I said, everybody had their cliques, their groups, and we had our group, which was called the FOP, the Friends of Paige, Dallas Page. So it was me, Kidman, Disco, Canyon, Vandy, all our group. So we were kind of in that different clique, and of course, everybody knows the clique that Nash was in with Hall and of course with Hogan and with X-Pac, and who I think is awesome. But it was. So I never got a chance to really during those years get to to really correspond a lot with Kevin, but I always would had like I said, cordial relationship, but I always would have some conversations with Scott and continue that relationship, that friendship with Scott, years after WCW. Hogan, it was always cordial. Same thing. I never really, I didn't run in that circle with him. So, it was always, he was always cordial to me. I certainly was always cordial to him because it was pretty darn cool. I came up during that era of the '80s, of the Hogan, Hulkamania, and all that stuff. And so, it was always had the cordial, conversations with everybody. I will say that one of the things that worked in my favor early on during my career in WCW was the fact that I, just by the grace of God, I got to know and became friends with Haku, and man, I tell you what, just being someone who was friends with him, it gave me a lot of clout, because those guys all respected Haku, and they still do, and so that, but that wasn't why I became friends with him. He's a great human being, and he's someone that I dearly, dearly love, like family, and to this day, and our relationship has grown stronger over the years. But yeah, it was just. Working with those guys now. I mean, I hate to say that because everybody wants to hear the controversial stuff, but there really wasn't. I mean, they kind of we didn't really cross paths that much because of what I was doing. Our stuff was different than what they were doing. So I don't think we were necessarily a threat to anything they were doing, so to speak. And we were just trying to be good company guys back then and do our part. And so yeah, I mean it was fun. I mean, listen, it was. Every night we went to work at Monday Nitro and Thursday Night Thunder. We were working, everything was sold out. We were wrestling in the biggest arenas around, and to be able to have a great seat, kind of behind the scenes to watch when those guys went out and really study what they did, because people that are fans or not of Nash and Scott and Hogan during that era. I mean, these guys, listen, they knew what they were doing. They had drawn a lot of money, and so for me, it was like, okay, watch and learn and take what works for me, and then whatever doesn't work, okay. But take advantage of this opportunity to learn from guys who have drawn money, and that's what this business is all about. I don't care what anybody says about how many moves you can do and all that stuff. It's about drawing money, period. And if you can draw money, great. If you can't draw money, then you're just fooling yourself if you think somehow you're going to have a great career in this business.
Absolutely. Oh, and real quick, I want to throw this in. Bruce Lee versus Haku. Who wins?
Oh, Haku versus anybody. Haku versus anybody.
There you go. There's the answer.
But I will say this. The one thing that most people never talk about with Haku, with Tonga, is the fact that, and I know you guys know this, but he literally is one of the kindest, gentlest, biggest hearted people I've ever known in my entire life. And I'm just in and out of wrestling. He is that guy. And that's a part that I wish people knew more about him and talked more about, is that he is one of the kindest people I've ever met. But he also is that guy that people talk about. And, as far as his reputation to being, I call him the baddest cat in the jungle, but he doesn't have to tell you he's the baddest cat in the jungle. He just is. But he's also, he has a heart, the size of Texas, and he is just the kindest person that you could ever meet. And I feel so truly honored that I've got a chance to become friends with him and his family. And, just like I said, in or out of wrestling, he's one of the greatest people I've ever met. And I really, truly feel so blessed to know him. I mean, he's just an amazing, amazing guy.
Well, I got to say, Ray, we're truly honored to have you on the show, and we're truly honored to say thank you for what you've done in the wrestling business, and we look forward to having you on again. Merry Christmas to you and your
thank you,
family,
guys.
Ray. God bless.
Oh, Merry Christmas to you guys. Hey, guys, I just want to say this is a huge honor for me because it's been a long time coming, and I really, really am glad that we finally got a chance to connect because, like I said, Sandy Beach, he thinks the world of you guys, and, he's the guy that originally connected me to you guys, and, yeah, man, I mean, I'm very happy I finally got a chance to be on the show, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
We will, and
Honored.
no one's happier than us. Thanks, Ray.
Honored.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you, guys. Merry Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas. Glacier. Name's Glacier.
Great interview.
Yeah.
Could have gone like 5 hours.
Yeah, we could have kept going. That's for sure. That is for sure.
I just want to wish everybody, first, Bart, again, happy birthday.
Bart Man.
Glad to be part of the family.
Yeah,
and I want to
absolutely.
thank
The Bart Man.
Jared, thank you for your continual efforts on this show, and thank you for all you do. You are by far the best producer, and you're a hell of a human being. So Merry Christmas to you and yours.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
And I want to say Merry Christmas to our Monte and the family.
Monte and the family. Monte and the Pharaoh family.
Monte
and
and
the
the
family.
Monte and the Pharaoh
The
family.
Monte family.
And we can name the list, but I want to say thank you all. And we hope
everybody.
you have a wonderful
Everybody.
holidays. Keep
Absolutely.
your family and be grateful that you're still on this planet, that
There you
you can
go.
spend this time. And I'm grateful
There you go.
to have people like Ray Lloyd come on this thing. And I'm grateful for you, my friend. Happy and Merry Christmas.
You too, brother.
And
you too.
until
Absolutely.
Thursday.
What are you getting for Christmas? Do you already know?
Dude,
You got a tree? You got a tree?
Dude, I did the tree this year.
Okay.
And I don't really give myself props, but this year I'm so very proud of the way the tree looks.
Really? What'd you
Very
do?
proud. Just looks really nice.
Okay.
For me, this is a very special Christmas.
Little Hulk
right?
Hogan bobblehead on top?
I got a lot of wrestling, like The Rock, Stone Cold. Got a
Nice.
couple of those.
Okay.
Jets, Knicks. By the way, the Jets are over. It's 16-3.
I can't believe this crap.
It's already over.
I can't believe this
My
crap.
father already put a fork in him. It's over.
Oh, your father's right.
But anyway, you want to say anything to the
Unbelievable.
Monte and the family and send us out.
You did it again.
Monte and the Pharaoh family. Send us out.
Well, I can't thank everybody at home enough for when the chips were down, you guys found us.
Yes.
You guys have stood by our side. You guys are the reason why we have so much fun doing this, is because we can get the responses that we never thought we would ever get as regular people.
Yeah, there
You gotta love it. You guys are our Christmas tree. So
Very nice.
Until are we back next week? No, same back
next
time?
Thursday, same back channel, same
All
bad
right.
time.
Until next week, this is Monty. This is the Pharaoh. Merry Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. Later.